welcome to the video, and today we're going to be talking about some Bloodhound tips and tricks that will make you better at Bloodhound immediately. Now, before I get into the video, I do want to say that Bloodhound is a pretty straightforward character, so if you play Bloodhound a lot, you probably don't need these tips and tricks. You probably know all these things, but some of them might not be so obvious, and some of them might surprise you. So even if you're a Bloodhound main, you might not be using some of these tips, and they could just be good overall if you want to learn how to play Bloodhound. This is a good guide for you. So first thing I want to talk about is Bloodhound's passive. I feel like it's overlooked a lot, but he has the tracker passive where he's able to track people down. He can see what people have been doing in the area. He can see if enemies were there, and that can be sometimes hard to focus on and concentrate on. I feel like it's easily ignored sometimes, but it is pretty good, especially when you're fighting people and people try to break off to heal. For instance, say you beam a Wraith and she phases out, goes behind a rock, no one really knows where she is, and she's healing. You can use that tracker ability to follow her, and you will always be able to find her as Bloodhound. That's one of Bloodhound's specialties, is tracking down enemies that are trying to flake from the fight, as well as just finding enemies in general that may be hiding. So the next thing I want to talk about is his scan. Bloodhound's scan goes hand in hand with his ult, kinda. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but I think his scan should be used pretty regularly. I'm going to take off my helmet real quick. And I do want to say that the best way to use the scan is before you enter a building like this. Say you're going to enter here, you would just scan the building, see if there's anyone in there, and then go in. That way you don't get pulled up on and get surprised by a full squad that's sitting in there. I do want to note that it has like a 30-second cooldown, so you don't want to just be wasting it. But I would say that you should be using his scan pretty often, because you really never know in battle royales where people are at. There's no way of knowing if there's anyone around you, and the scan is that extra security that lets you know that no one's hiding, no one's looking at you, and it could be pretty effective and used in that sense. But the way I would use it during fighting goes hand in hand with the ult. So what I want to talk about here is, say there's enemies here. Actually we'll say this is a building, right? And there's enemies in that building. You want to ult like here, okay? And then you want to pull up on the building, scan the building, and then you want to go in like this and maybe like beam someone from up here, or breach in the building like this. That way you have your ultimate active and you know exactly where the people are. It's very beneficial to use it this way, to ult first and then move in with the scan. That way you can see people through walls. You already have the increased movement speed and the digital threat vision, so you'll be able to pretty much laser people pretty easily. You'll know exactly where they are when you're pushing in the building, and you'll be able to come in there very, very quickly. Another thing to point out, that the ultimate, if you get a knock, gives it 5 more seconds. So if you breach into a building and you kill the whole squad, that is an extra 15 seconds onto your ultimate time. And that can be very, very helpful, especially if you guys are getting third-partied. You can hit a quick armor swap, and then you will be right back in the fight. You'll still have your ultimate active, and by that time you'll probably have your scan up, so you could scan again, figure out where they're coming in from, and use it that way. That's probably Bloodhound's specialty as well as tracking down people. Bloodhound is very good at infiltrating buildings, especially if the buildings are being held down by caustic. A lot of people can suffer the visual effects of caustic, and they won't be able to see through the gas. Bloodhound, however, will be able to see directly through the gas, as long as he is not in it. So another thing I want to talk about with the ultimate is obviously the added movement speed. As you can see here, if I were to do this, it's pretty fast, but if I were to ult, the movement speed is increased. Oh, well, that's unfortunate. Either way, the movement speed is increased, so you'll be able to run faster, and that means you'll also be able to strafe faster. So as you can see here, if you strafe shoot, it will be much, much harder to hit you, since you're moving a lot quicker side to side. So it's one thing to keep in mind, since Bloodhound's hitbox is kind of big. You want to be able to move side to side very quickly to avoid a lot of the damage that will be coming in to hit you. do want to say one more bonus thing is that Bloodhound doesn't do very well in open spaces, unless there's a Bangalore. Bangalore's actually work in favor of Bloodhound, because if he ults, he can sit in the smoke and just laser people through it, or if anyone runs through the smoke, he can laser people through it in their ult. But you want to use your ult and save it for fights only. You don't want to use your ultimate for any movement speed or anything ridiculous like that, or getting out of the storm quicker. It's just a waste of his ult. His ult should be used almost entirely in fights, just exclusively in fights. There's no reason to use it in any other setting, and overall it will be a lot more beneficial to you, and you'd just be wasting it if you used it in any other way. So that's just basically the end of this video. I'm going to wrap it up. Basically, you scan buildings before you go in them. You ult before you go in fights. You want to ult before you scan. If you're going to get into a building, you ult before the enemy can see you, and then you scan when you're close enough to the enemy. The scan obviously has very good range, so you don't need to be right next to the enemies and then scan, because then you might find yourself in a situation where you're getting lasered. You just need to remember that the scan could probably reach all the way up there. As you can see, it just did. It has a very, very long range, so just keep that in mind. You don't need to get too close to the enemy, but if they're on the inside of a building and you know they are, you just want to scan right next to the wall on the outside before pushing in. Maybe find an entrance to the building that they're not looking at, like flank around from the back, shoot them like this. Since you know where they're looking and where they are, you'll have that little extra preparedness and awareness that you'll be ready for these people. So like I said before, Bloodhound is obviously a very straightforward legend. It's almost a little difficult to use him wrong, but I do believe that you should be using his abilities in a certain way. There's definitely a certain way to use his abilities, and it's pretty easy to waste them. If you just use your scan randomly, like, you know, in the middle of nowhere, like, it's probably just, you're just wasting it. And then if you need it 10 seconds down the line, you're not going to have it. As well as the ult, if you're using it for movement speed, you know, you're obviously wasting it. So that's pretty much it. Just don't waste his abilities, and you should be fine. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.